Mr. Tabman, thank you very much for joining me, sir. I mean, I guess I should start by asking, what are the main security failures here?
Well, we always go with initial reporting and what we do know, and there's plenty that we don't know. And just keeping in mind that the Secret Service is a highly trained, highly skilled agency at dignitary protection. But clearly, we have to wonder, how does someone get so close to that inner perimeter, though maybe just outside of it, but so close that they're able to fire off rounds in rapid succession and actually were able to strike the former president. So the question would be, why was there an opening there, and why was he not detected as the shooter was moving into that position?
Interestingly enough, there are reports, widely reported statements about witnesses to or at least one witness to the shooter getting up on the roof and agents being informed of that. So what went on there?
And that's what an after-action report is going to have to determine. Certainly, once they get through the investigation, the immediate investigation, which is making sure there's no further conspiracy, nobody else responsible, that may carry on sort of part two of this. They're going to look at their internal actions, review it, and say, how is that possible? Where did the communications break down? Why didn't the Secret Service observe it? And if somebody called in, why wasn't action taken on it to neutralize the shooter before he had a chance to fire off these rounds?
And of course, sir, I imagine there's a lot of preparation that goes in to these rallies in terms of security. How come a line of sight to the president was left open, especially from a rooftop?
Okay, well, we can't control every aspect, the physical aspect of the surrounding buildings and area. We have this all the time. President makes speeches in D.C., and there's a lot of high roofs and windows. They're always going to be present in any kind of urban or even semi-urban environment. So we can't clear every building and make sure every rooftop is clear. During the time, of course, beforehand, you do an assessment. You go and you check the buildings and you look for these spots that might be vulnerable. If you want to put an agent up there, you get with the owner of the building and you ask him, can we plant Secret Service agents up here as counter snipers, security, to ensure it doesn't happen. But if there's a building far away and there's an open rooftop or there's windows in the building, we can't cover every window. But that's why we have counter snipers out there to look for that, look for those threats, and be prepared. We're never going to be 100% secure in a public venue.
In your experience, so where would the investigation go from here?
Again, the investigation will go first to looking at the suspect. We will put together sort of a prosecution, even though he's dead, we won't prosecute him. We'll put together a prosecutable case with all the evidence so we know what happens from beginning to end. And we want to find out if anybody else was involved, aided and abetted in any way, if anybody else would have a criminal culpability. And again, is he part of some greater conspiracy, which might indicate that there'll be another threat, immediate threat to the former president. My guess is he's a lone wolf, but you can't presume. You have to make sure. And then the FBI and the Secret Service are going to tap their resources to see if this is going to gin up any more kind of violence. My concern is now that this has happened, you're going to have two types of people sitting on the precipice of violence. You're going to have one that's going to say, gee, I need to pick up where this guy left off. This is my calling. Or someone else will interpret this as their calling to seek revenge and, maybe shoot at President Biden or somebody else. So the escalation of violence is quite clear, clear and imminent danger. And it's going to be up to law enforcement community to maintain their intelligence level to see if we can thwart any further political violence.
So what went through your head when you heard the profile of the shooter, a young man from not too far away from the location of the rally, actually from there, 20 years old?
Honestly, we could have figured it out before the profile came out. I think when we do this research, we get all this electronic communications and cell phone data, we will probably once again see writings or ramblings of somebody who has, grievances built up and felt it was their mission to take it out. As we've seen in other shooters, workplace shooters, school shooters, they know the area, so they feel more comfortable operating in a local area as opposed to traveling somewhere. So a young man, access to a weapon, nothing really surprising to me other than the fact that it happened.
There's some dispute over claims that there was a request for increased security for Donald Trump, and that was not granted. What do you know about that?
I don't know about that. I haven't heard that, and I don't know who made that request. I can say that the Secret Service, Donald Trump was a protectee simply by being a former president. And now, of course, he's a protectee as being a presidential candidate. Again, the Secret Service is very adept at what they do. They train for this. We've had an attempt in recent history, so it's not like we're totally, oblivious to this threat. So I'd like to hear the facts of that before we, sort of accuse the Secret Service of not responding to what they felt was a request for additional security.
Understood, sir. Now, of course, the country is known to be very divided at this stage with a very unique election coming up. I wonder how this incident is going to impact the security plans for the upcoming Republican Party convention in Milwaukee.
Well, I think in the short term, it's going to sort of up the game for both the Republicans and the Democrats for the reasons I just explained. So we'll have a heightened security alert, maybe probably expand that outer perimeter you hear us talk about, make it more secure so someone can't even reach the inner perimeter from the outside. Maybe, again, more scrutiny of rooftops and windows, as we discussed, trying to engage the public more in cooperating, giving the Secret Service access to key points. But we're not going to stop our presidents and our presidential appointees, or candidates rather, to go out there and press the flesh and campaign. That's just the nature of the business. They're going to do it, and it may be heightened security for about 4 or 5 months. But just as if we've seen in other violent matters, just like 9/11, all the heightened security afterwards. But over time, we tend to return back to normal, which is what we want to do. We don't want to feel victimized by these threats. So I think a presidential candidate and a current president, while campaigning, are going to want to show American resolve that we won't be intimidated by one act of violence, and we will continue on as we always do. So there'll be heightened security, but I don't think you're going to see the candidates, hiding behind the Secret Service. They're going to be out there campaigning as they always did.
Now, of course, the conventions, having been to party conventions myself, they're quite contained environments, very large but contained. I wonder, when it comes to smaller events such as this, whether the security services might advise the presidential candidates, both of them, perhaps to think twice about these kind of settings.
Well, you don't get close to the president in these things without being scanned. When I was with the FBI, I had an opportunity to meet the sitting vice president. I can tell you the Secret Service relieved me of my weapon. They took no chances, even with an FBI agent. So they're pretty cautious when you get close. So if it's small, there'll be that much more security. Everyone will be screened. It'll be easier for the Secret Service agents to keep an eye out for everybody looking for suspicious behavior. The larger the venue, the more crowded it is. Obviously, the harder it is to do that. But they're going to keep that inner perimeter very secure. It's the outer perimeter you have to worry about. That still falls within their, sort of zone of responsibility. And now they're going to have to review what they did that allowed this to happen.
And of course, Mr. Tabman, what chance is there really to control the environment if someone is willing to risk their own life in order to commit a crime like this?
No, it's an interesting comment you said. When I was in the police department, I trained as a hostage negotiator. This is back in the 80s. We always said that, negotiation was saving their lives. Then over the years, that transformed as to how do you negotiate with someone who's not interested in saving their lives? There is no foolproof way to protect anybody. All we could do is minimize the risk, try to deter it by the quick actions of the Secret Service in killing this individual. But again, if someone's going in there with a death wish and no plan of coming out, it's going to be very hard to deter and very hard to stop.
Michael Tabman, thank you very much for your perspective, sir.